When someone celebrates their 60th birthday and they look back over the years, the most fun is in remembering the good times. But if you're honest with yourself, you have to acknowledge the not-so-good times too, for reasons of balance, if for no other motive. And the same goes for a radio station. We've talked about the gold mine years of the 40s, 50s and 60s. But it's no secret to the radio industry in Melbourne, and indeed to the listening public, that the extraordinary success stories from our past have not been as forthcoming in the 70s and 80s. 3DB for 30 years was considered the most successful single broadcasting station in Australia. But then came the harder years. Harder in terms of retaining our success, and then the battle to regain our success. In the harder years, there have been many personalities who've carried the mantle of their predecessors with great dedication and ability, but with the monumental acceptance of television, the retirements and deaths of former stars, the increase from 8 AM broadcasting channels in 1975 to in excess of 20 available today on both AM and FM bands, we no longer have it all our own way. Not only is the competition big in numbers, but it's at its most competitive ever in quality. In some ways, it could be seen that we're paying for our runaway success for all those decades. The big boy was taken on by former opponents it used to wipe the floor with. But now it was our turn to be up against the ropes. And while we've had a lot of good people in our corner, it just wasn't enough. Everyone has a theory on what went wrong. As a listener, I remember many good things still happening. DB pioneered talkback radio with Barry Jones, now a member of the Bob Hawke government, and Gerald Lyons scooped away from the ABC. But what did go wrong? Again, purely as a listener, it just seems to me that it's more than a coincidence that there was a definite change in listener climate when John Eden was taken from his breakfast program back in 1975. If it wasn't the cause, perhaps it was at least a symptom. We talk about these things today simply because we'd be weak to ignore them. Speaking of John Eden, this is his theory.
Well, I think about 15 years ago, we started to fall down management-wise. And then the station started to disintegrate a bit. And then we let the young predators in. And before long, they were quarrying the place and seeing us as being an opportunity on the way to television. But management let the station down very badly in the last 15 years.
Bill Collins has his thoughts.
I think we were probably too good in the 50s and early 60s, and we became complacent. Now, I believe our sales department at 3DB became order takers, because I know quite often, as you know, you just couldn't get on the station at one stage, and people would ring up, a sponsor would ring up and say something, oh, well, we haven't got anything, we'll put you on the list and contact you. Then came the time when we tried to contact people and they'd gone somewhere else. And that was the start of the fall there, I believe. And I think all of us, practically right through the station, had become so complacent that we were the top and we didn't have to do much about it. It just happened that we suddenly became challenged in all areas. And also, there was a bit of an economic recession in the 60s, in the early 60s, and I think this also hit at the advertising. We weren't prepared to fight back. And it was a very, very sad period, and also it was getting to the stage, I suppose, where we were losing a lot of our stars, such as a couple of football teams might do all at once. You lose 4 or 5 of your top players all at once, and suddenly you're back in the centre of the field or towards the bottom. I think this may have happened to us also.
Lawrence Costin, by virtue of his 30 years service to 3DB, has earned his say.
Well, I think one of the main reasons I've always considered was that we moved from being what was termed a family station or a family sound to try and compete with, shall we say, a more younger sound. 3DB, as you know, was a family station. They had this great intimacy with their listeners, which they held for years and years and years. And in the early 70s, it was suggested that 3DB's listeners were 50 and over. And it was of the opinion that those people 50 and over were not what was required in what, shall we say, the new 3DB. They felt that they did not buy the products that were advertised, that they would not have the money that the younger people would have to buy the various products that may be advertised on the air, and so they turned around the complete format of the station to a much younger sound. And I think this great turnaround caused most of the older listeners to move to other stations, and as there were already 2 or 3 stations on the commercial dial that played young music and had got a head start, they stayed there, with the result that we neither got the older nor did we get the younger listeners, and we were in between. And I think this was the major reason why we moved away from that family-type sound to a younger sound that caused the rift.
One of the shining hopes of those grey years was a young announcer who first joined 3DB in 1965, while the station was still enjoying its place at the top. And he stayed for 16 years and became known as the angry young man of radio. Dennis Scanlon.
Bert, my first memory is, it's gone now, but I was in the old 3DB when I started, where the Herald loading docks are now, or part of the loading docks in Flinders Street. It was a dreadful old building, but it was loaded with atmosphere. And I used to was hired to do the Midnight to Dawn show, and we used to do that not in the main studio, but a little studio downstairs, where there was no air conditioning. In summertime, you virtually sat there in your jockettes, and in winter, you sat there huddled over a 1-bar radiator. But it was fun at those days, Bert. We had a great team there. We had John Eden, of course, was doing breakfast. David Johnson was there. He was doing mornings. Lawrence Costin, Charles Scase. And I'd come from 3XY, which is basically a music station, to the then personality station of Melbourne. And in those days, they were rating #1. And I was a bit overawed at first, but I just remember the unbelievable warmth that people like John Eden showed me, and the guidance that people like John Eden showed me. And it was fun. Even though the amenities were diabolical, it was a fun time.
While Dennis was here, the station went for that change of audience that Lawrence spoke about.
And we tried to get the young people. We tried to update the music, but we sort of did it in a schizophrenic fashion. We still had talk back between 9 and 11, and we'd follow 2 hours of talk back with Led Zeppelin. So if we were going after young people, we didn't do it properly. But it was my opinion that we shouldn't have worried about young people. We sort of had the image of a family station, a part of Melbourne, like TUE was in Sydney. And I think that was the start of it, Bert. We virtually said to everyone over 40 years of age, look, 3DB is going to change. We don't want you. They left us. We didn't get the younger people because they had the idea of 3DB being this family station, perhaps appealing to an older audience. So we didn't get them, and we just told the very loyal listeners that we had virtually to go jump in the lake. So I think that was the start of the rot, Bert, that we tried to chase the young people, and our traditional audience we said goodbye to.
If Dennis Scanlon was the angry young man, the overwhelming vote for the crazy young man of DB in the 70s would have to go to this gentleman.
So, I see that 3DB has 60 candles on its birthday cake. Well, I hope the fire brigade has the cake under control. Hello, this is Rick Melbourne. Yes, I was with 3DB for 5 of those 60 years, 1975 through to 1980. I remember Mr. Murray, Mr. Lee Murray, mine and everyone else's announcing teacher, saying to me,
"One day, son, I'm going to get you into 3DB, despite the fact, son, that you don't barrack for Collingwood."
Ah, dear Mr. Murray. Well, he was right. But I didn't join 3DB until 1975, some 10 years after his prophecy. And true to my radio career, it was through a revolution. Gone was the call sign 3DB. In its place, a star-spangled logo which read DB Music. Ah, yes, we spared no expense. We hired Chelsea Brown to sing the jingles. Chelsea Brown. Funny, isn't it? Today it sounds like a fence stain. They put me on the breakfast show, and I'm pleased to say I went from 6 points up to 15.7 in the first year. Been a while since 3DB hit those figures. Oh, but to this day, I certainly do thank you, the people of Melbourne. It was an exciting time for Melbourne radio. Yet it was more than that. New music was emerging. Remember, we called it disco.
Rick's stay at 3DB the first time around was to be short-lived. His departure from the station to join 3KZ was headline news. It's over 10 years ago since it happened, and there are various versions of the story told. As I remember being told by the then program manager, Brendan Sheedy, he, Brendan, was invited by Rick and a couple of the blokes to meet at a Melbourne hotel. Brendan accepted the invitation to find that the reason for the rendezvous was a mass resignation. Rick, his newsman Robert Hicks, the Midnight to Dawn announcer Ron O'Neill, and DB's morning personality Ted Bull were flying the coop, landing on the Trades Hall, home then to 3KZ. This is how Rick remembers it.
It was about this time that old Mother 3DB and I had a fallout. I think it was about money. But then again, I'm not the first disc jockey for this to happen at any radio station, am I? Thank you. Well, of course, this is what triggered the great radio raid. It's now history, but a deal was drawn up that saw myself going to another said radio station as program director and breakfast announcer. Well, I very sadly told my newsman of my intentions, and he signed up at once. As did the morning 9 to 12 announcer. Well, he'd been fired anyway, along with the afternoon announcer. And it suddenly dawned on me, with all these people leaving en masse along with myself, 3DB would be without an entire daytime lineup. Oh, Melbourne, what have you done? Well, when the news broke in the press, utter mayhem, and they have never seen that again. Someone called us pirates. Yes, I suppose we were, so we became pirates, playing the hits and having a lot of fun. They were outrageous days. True, we did bring about some radio changes that influenced the business then and even today. We expanded the music list, and frankly, in one word, we dared. And we dared to do and try a lot of new things, and the great radio raid actually did more good than harm. Well, we went out to functions, we were in our pirate outfits and installed a parrot in the foyer of this particular radio station. Actually, I think it's still working there today. It's probably due for long service leave, is it? All the press shots were done aboard the Polly Woodside. And here's something interesting. For the first time in the history of Melbourne, the Jolly Roger was hoisted above the Trades Hall building where our studios were. It was rewarding to see stars like Charlton Heston leaving our studios wearing an official eye patch. Well, dear old 3DB, after a while, all was forgiven. And what was headlined as the Great Radio Raid number 2 saw all of us returning back to the alma mater, back to DB Music.
DB Music, just one of the many call signs the station has used in the last 15 years. And perhaps that's a clue to the real problem. Too many call signs and too many formats in too few years.